Oh, wait. Yeah, it's recording okay, anyway, recording in progress. I was trying to record it to my local and I didn't do that right. So anyway, Chip, you're my backup. You got it? I guess so. Okay, anyway, welcome everybody to another week of When Black Women Gather. And today we're actually going to resume a conversation that we started in April about being Black in the LGBTQ community and how the two of those things intersect. So what we have two guests with us today to talk about it. We have Cleo Manago and we have Diamond Stylz, who I will feature in 1 second, but I just wanted to share with you what are the rules for conversations here. We are respectful. I guarantee you respect. I cannot guarantee you comfort. We are allowed to be open and honest about how we feel, but we want to speak in a way that we can be heard. And the way that we can be heard is that you say things in a respectful manner. So that's non-negotiable. But we don't censor people here. So just control your emotions and say what you wish, but be respectful about it. And we will be recording, as I told you. So if you're not interested in being recorded, then make sure you turn off your camera or change your name on the screen, whatever you're comfortable with. And I am going to spotlight our two guests and introduce them. And we're just going to have a conversation. We'll start out with them and you all can hop in as we go. All right, Diamond, where are you at on my screen? There you are. So I know we've all seen, we've met Cleo before. This is our first time meeting Diamond. Diamond, is your camera frozen? Oh, there you go, good. Okay, so let me just tell you a little bit about who they are. The reason what sparked the conversation here is, well, we said we would continue it from the last time, but this whole controversy with Dave Chappelle, I hope you've all watched the video on him, the closer, and that you can know what we're talking about and also be able to, help in speak into the conversation. So I'll start my introductions with Cleo. Cleo is a behavioral health and cultural analyst, writer, educator, popular speaker, and Black African social justice and defense focused human rights activist. I'm sure you all have seen him. Hopefully you watch Roland Martin now on his it's not a podcast. What is it considered, Cleo? It's not a podcast. It's more than that. Because he started
it's a streaming. I think it's a streaming news program.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where I was first introduced to Cleo. But Cleo, as I told you in the email that I sent you, he is the CEO of the Black Men's Xchange and the AmASSI Centers for Black Wellness and Culture. He is known for having coined the phrase same gender loving and same gender lovers. And he is going to talk to us today about the perspective of his perspective of what it means to be same gender loving. And of course, we're going to talk about the thing with the situation with Dave Chappelle. He studied behavioral health and cultural anthropology at New College of California. He began his doctoral studies at California for Integral Studies in San Francisco. He holds a doctorate in cultural and religious studies from Christ University and is community faculty at Charles Drew University of Science and Medicine in LA. And as I said, he currently appears on the Roland Martin unfiltered digital broadcasts, but you've seen him on BET, TV One, Fox News, C-SPAN, ABC, NBC, PBS, CBS, and National Radio. And he's been here with us before. Diamond, thank you, Miss Diamond, for coming to hang out with us. I actually got introduced to Diamond through one of my students who's also on this call, Kay Montez. Thank you, Kay. And thank you, Diamond, for coming. Diamond has been one of the longstanding voices of the millennial Black trans community, She started her activism at age 17 when she won a First Amendment rights lawsuit against the Indianapolis public school system, a victory that allowed her to go to the prom in a gender-affirming gown instead of a tuxedo. At 19, she was the first openly trans woman to attend the legendary HBCU Jackson State University, where she honed her passion for activism. For a decade, she has used social media platforms like YouTube to archive trans people and events around the globe. So welcome to both of you. Okay, we can't hear you, Diamond.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, great.
Greetings, Diamond.
Hey, Cleo.
Greetings, Diamond.
So let's just jump right in and start talking about the whole situation with Dave Chappelle. For various reasons, people within I'm saying the community, is that okay if I just use that generically? Okay, all right, I'll be saying the community.
What was that? I didn't hear you.
If I just say the community instead of the LGBTQ, I just was going to say.
I don't know if it's me.
You can't hear me?
So
Can you hear me
every
now?
time you say that, I hear you now, but every time you use whatever you're going to call the community, that keeps going out.
Oh.
So say that one more time.
The community, just the community.
Oh, I can deal with the community. Okay.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Yeah, that's just I'm shortening it up. So there was a lot of controversy about the Dave Chappelle film, and what I want to hear both of your perspectives on what he had to say, or first, if we can just start out with what's your perspectives on the community. We'll start with you, Cleo. Like, what is your position? Your take on the community in general, and what is your position on it? Is there anything that you want to share with us, just to put it in context where you're coming from?
Ooh, okay. I'll attempt to be brief. Can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. I'm going to speak about this in context, meaning that there's all kinds of things I could say about the Black community, but we're focusing on issues relevant to sexuality and gender nuance, and that's where I'll contextualize or base my perspective. As I've mentioned before, the Black community has been so occupied since we've been in this country with surviving, with deflecting the backlash of white supremacy, patriarchy, and trying to find ways over a few hundred years or so of trying to have some relief from that. And as a result of trying to survive living in an anti-Black terror state, that consists of police brutality, discrimination, a media in this country that doesn't affirm Black people, that doesn't affirm Black love. I mean, if you watch most Black television shows, whether you're streaming it or watching the basic TV, it still shows Black people as criminals or as people who only matter their relationship to white folks. And it's still pretty much, when it comes to media, a negative portrayal. And then there's been the issue of police brutality, et cetera, that we dealt with in a very, very immediate way. So my point, then there's religion. So we've been very occupied with surviving a avalanche of all kinds of issues, which has interrupted our capacity to even focus on gender nuance issues, people's sexuality outside of the confines of heterosexuality. As a result of going into several generations of not having a direct conversation about that aspect of the Black family, there's been an accumulation of frustration among same-gender loving and trans people. There's been some misdirected rage toward Black people more than it is toward racism among the same-gender loving and bi and trans Black subpopulation. And because we have not been talking about these issues in rational, inviting, and even neutral ways, there is a sense of frustration, sensitivity, and a lot of misdirected rage. And the white gay community, who I call the LGBTQ community, has taken advantage of that Black frustration and the anti-Blackness that's often within it, and uses it for its own purposes. And the David Chappelle show helped to illuminate some of the ironies and some of the struggles that we have to face that include a very racist and white supremacist LGBTQ community, and also a community, as I said a moment ago, that hasn't really taken time on a macro level to look at issues of gender nuance, trans issues, or even same gender loving issues. So here we are. And now that these issues have been brought to the fore by David Chappelle, we're having another conversation. However, the conversation this time may be potentially more transformational if we hang in there, because since George Floyd was murdered, there's been more attempts to have deeper conversations relevant to Black people than we've had before. So this is a very complex issue. I'll close with saying that the state of the same gender loving bi trans community, Black folks, is pretty unstable. It's pretty politically nebulous, and it's not a unified or politically strong community. As a result, it tends to take its cues from a racist white gay community, which creates more conflict with the Black community. And here we are.
Thank you. Diamond, quickly tell us your philosophy and about the situation with Dave Chappelle, and just in general, introduce us to Diamond. What should we know about Diamond?
I am a Black trans woman who has transitioned. I transitioned in '95, and I have seen a lot of change, a lot of advancement when it comes to trans visibility, but what we are fighting against seems to be steadfast, and the same stuff that I was fighting in '95 is the same stuff that I'm fighting now in 2021. So we live in a both and and world. Yes, white, gay racism is real, but you know what else is real? The real negative effects in real time of people contributing to the culture, whether it be comedians, whether it be hate online, whatever it is, contributing to the culture that allows the harm of women, cisgender or trans. Racist white gays are not murdering Black women, cisgender or trans. Black men are. So I feel like using racism, while that is important, quite important, we live in a both and and world, as I said, using racism as a shield or as a deflection or as a red herring to not atone for the harm that Black men have done to us is disingenuous. I think that we have to, when do we get to the part where, yes, the white man is on your back, yes, white racist gays, we call them out too, Black LGBT people, we call them out too. But when are we going to talk about, since Dave is a straight man, straight Black man, when are straight Black men, or men in general, because sometimes gays can be misogynist, when are they going to atone for the harm that they actually do to us without bringing up racism? That's my perspective. I want to know when are we going to call that out? When are you going to be held accountable for that, the actions that you do that harm us?
So I guess to that, I would say to either of you can answer this, like when you show up in the world, like how do you separate the two? And when you show up in the world, do you see yourself as showing up as Black first or gay or transgender or single? Okay, she's shaking her head like, don't ask that question. But it's a question, right?
No, it's a question. I can't take my Blackness off. I can't take my trans womanhood off. I'm coming with everything in the door. There's no hierarchy of which one comes first. Everything is coming in the door, and I'm going to accept. I am only going to expect you to deal with all the oppression. Patricia Hill Collins talks about the matrix of domination. I'm going to need you to fix all of that. I don't need you to. It's not going to be my blackness first, my womanhood first. No, that's what patriarchy tells us. We have to protect the Black men. No, fuck that. No, everything that is harming us, from the white patriarch, from the Black patriarch, from, cis women, whoever is harming people, they need to stop. And so for me, I'm bringing everything in the door. It's not nothing getting sat or being prioritized.
What's your answer to that, Cleo?
I am an activist against oppression. And the primary oppression that I see that's really harming us is white supremacy mythology and toxic patriarchy. Toxic patriarchy and white supremacy mythology are two viciously horrendous, dehumanizing, and murderous and crazy-making phenomena that I resist, and I've been resisting the majority of my adult life. I never think about, in terms of how I walk in the world, that question, what do I walk in first? But when I do think about it, my knee-jerk reaction is that I walk in as an African, a person of African descent who is alive so far in a anti-Black terroristic society that's also viciously patriarchal. I don't walk around personally thinking about my sexuality. I can talk about it, I can address it in great detail, and I can talk about what oppression looks like in that regard and what affirmation looks like inside of my own work in that regard. But I feel like a Black male all the time. And as a result, I don't know what it's like to feel safe and not under attack. I can't even fathom what that might feel like. I'm looking forward to addressing what Diamond said regarding Black men murdering trans women. And I appreciate them saying that so-called gays can be misogynists, but I want to address that as soon as, at the quickest opportunity. But
well, go right ahead. I asked that question for a couple of reasons, but go ahead, go into it.
Okay. I used to work in law enforcement for some times, and I worked in a prison for some times. And the blanket statement Diamond makes that Black men are murdering trans women is an exaggeration, and it's not true. Some Black men have murdered people, but Black men generally are not murdering trans women. I've never murdered nobody and never will murder anybody. So it's a blanket statement that saying that Black men are murdering trans women. There are people who are murderers and who have been driven to do that have done that, but it's not what Black men generally are doing. Also, some of the people that have killed some of these people are not Black. There's been a Latino or two in the picture in terms of leading to the murders of trans people, some white men. So I really find it problematic, that whole mantra that Black men are murdering trans women. In the so-called, I don't call Black people gay, but I'm gonna use that terminology to make a point. And I'll contextualize it with this. I have been in close relationship to trans people since I was a teenager. And I can bore you with the details of what that means, but the bottom line is that I have a very intimate and close connection to transgender people since I was a kid. And there's not one trans story. One of the things I appreciated when I heard the first 40 minutes, I couldn't get to the whole 4 hours, but when I first heard the first 40 minutes of a talk I saw Diamond do, I was very impressed with Diamond, because Diamond is brilliant, Diamond is perceptive, and Diamond is sharp. But I did have a problem with this whole perspective of so-called cis men and so-called Black men who are murdering trans women. One of the things I learned as a young person by having trans people close to me is that society, including same-gender loving people, can be abusive and dismissive to trans people. There's people who assume when they hear LGBTQ that one-liner that is a big happy group of people that get together and stay together, and that's not true. There's a lot of femophobic homosexual men who don't want to be caught dead in the same room with transgender people because their own issues around a challenge to traditional male constructs. So the anti-trans impulse, which I got a lot of it, because how could you be friends with her? It was almost all same gender loving men saying this. The dismissiveness and the lack of consideration for trans people goes beyond sexuality. And the attacks to the point of detriment goes beyond sexuality. It's a anti-feminine trans women and feminine male reaction that one of the most male privileging communities in this society is same gender loving and gay identified men. So it's too varied in terms of the attack on trans people for me to sit through a broad stroke saying that Black men are murdering trans people, because like I said in previous instances, there's all kinds of people being murdered that are Black, and there's all kinds of people murdering Black people. And the people who are being murdered the most in the United States of America are the same men that trans people are saying is murdering them. At last count, about almost 9,000 Black men were murdered. Almost 1,600 Black women were murdered. And about 30 people who identify as trans women were murdered at last count, Black. So it's too much murder going on for me to tolerate the white gay agenda to only push trans issues while the rest of the Black community is dealing with a disproportionate problem. And I'll end this particular tangent by reiterating that it bothers me, the whole mantra, because it sounds like what a white racist would say, that Black men are murdering trans. No, all Black men are not murdering trans. That's not true.
All right, Diamond, I see you ready. Go ahead.
I think it's very, I don't know, that just seems weird for you. I didn't say all Black men are killing trans women. I didn't say that. I said Black men are killing trans women. The ones who get caught, the ones who are being arrested, the cases of trans women being murdered, which predominantly are Black trans women, predominantly dark-skinned Black trans women. When we catch the culprit, it is Black men. So I'm not saying that you are killing all Black men, you or somebody who is not killing trans women. I'm saying the ones that we find out when we catch them, they're Black men. So Black men are killing us. So the culture that we live in.
What's problematic with that is that people get murdered always, and this is a statistical fact,
I'm talking
in
about
close proximity to their group. Most white trans people, and there's white trans people being murdered too, are being murdered by white men. But nobody's saying, nobody is saying all on TV and every place that white men are murdering trans women.
They're not dying at our rates. It's in the same way intimate partner violence. Black women are being killed by their partners. More so than white, more so. I linked a couple of studies for you to see the stats. That Black women are being murdered by their partners, predominantly Black men. More than white women, more than Latino women. Only people who are beating us in numbers is Native women.
So to play the devil's advocate, first of all, I sent you both a video by Samson McCormick, and he pretty much suggested that this whole thing is set up to pit Black trans against the Black community. So the Black gay, he said Black queer community versus the Black community. And I kind of wanted to get your feel on that. And I think when I'm trying to understand, so when Cleo says that it's not just Black men who are killing Black trans, I think it's the same thing when we talk about, we talk about just, the Black on Black crime. And there's no talk about white on white crime. I think is that the similarity to what you're saying, Cleo?
There's some similarity, but what's often missing from this conversation that's very divisive and feeds into racism is the context in which Black people live in disproportionately when it comes to the pressures of white supremacy, racism, and patriarchy, and the generational lack of resolve and engagement of the phenomena that over time accumulates into misdirected rage. And there's a lot of misdirected rage in our community resulting from many generations of not dealing with the misdirected rage that was a problem back then, resulting from Black people's systemic inability to fight their real enemy. And what's missing from a lot of these blanket statements about Black people is the context that we live in. For example, when the HIV/AIDS issue first came out back in the 80s, and I was alive and well during that time, the Black community was distracted with police brutality, racism, the split between Black men and women that the system had done, particularly for poor people, particularly they were on welfare systems. And there were all these attacks and stigmas on just being Black that got in the way of dealing with something else that was stigmatized, which was homosexuality and gender nuance. So instead of putting Black people's anxiety around, including David Chappelle's anxiety, who definitely has anxiety around emasculation of Black men, instead of putting Black men's and Black women's behavior, including pathological behavior, in context, we hear these blanket statements like so-called Black on Black crime, and that Black men are killing trans people with no context.
They are.
No context.
The context is the cases.
Black
Show
people,
me a case where a white man killed a trans woman, Black trans woman.
Oh, there's cases of I know personally about cases of Black women being killed by white people.
I'm talking about Black trans women. Show me a case where, multiple ones, that a white man killed a Black trans woman.
I haven't researched that. I'm sure it happens, but I haven't researched that.
You sit here and call me a liar. You sit here and call me a liar. You said that I'm lying.
Diamond, let me
when
make
I have research, this is the work that I do.
Let me make something clear. I do not consider you a liar. You don't know me yet, but I was one of the main influencers of you being here because I have a lot of respect for you. I have a lot of respect for your insight, for your genius, for your passion, for your activism. I really, really do. So I don't consider you a liar at all. I consider this is an issue of perception, not lying. And
if the murderers are Black men, how is my perception off? If the people of the Black trans women who are dying,
your perception, number one, has no context. Your perception, number two, it comes out of, well, I won't go into that. That's going to be too controversial. There's more to this than what's being said, and what's being said is harmful to Black. What's not being said is just harmful and divisive among Black people.
Cleo, can I say something? And I sent you a text that may be helpful. I think it's helpful if you give some, and you've done this before, historical context, because at the end of the day, and you've been around the world, and I studied cultures, pre-Eurocentric cultures, before they became Eurocentric in terms of their behavior, the language, the capitalist, the whole thing. So it might be helpful if you give a little context as to the, looking at other cultures where everybody has some role to play. And the issues that we're talking about today, really in other cultures that have not been conquered by Eurocentric thinking, that is not at the heart. When you talk about indigenous cultures on this continent, you talk about indigenous cultures around the world. This is not an issue for them because they, one, did not have chattel slavery, and two, didn't have the Puritans who brought a lot of this mindset that we're dealing with in 2020. And they haven't been here in almost 300 years, but they still control how we see the body. They still control in terms of the whole issue of sexuality. And so do you want to kind of fill in? I just wanted to give that to you because I think that'll be helpful because we're having an argument without having the historical context and understanding the influence of Eurocentric thinking and behavior and capitalist thinking and behavior and language that's impacting this whole argument. So if you want to go ahead, I just want to throw that to you. Go ahead, Cleo.
Let me say this. Black people have always wrestled with derogatory assumptions, miseducation, stereotypes, and disdain about our identity. We are always making decisions to accommodate or resist this kind of miseducation, always, because that is what's used to justify our harm. There are tons of times, I think somebody said it in the chat, there is tons of times where joking about being Black, minstrel shows in the context of history, minstrel shows the humor of making Black people seem intellectually inept. There's tons of times when humor has been called out when it comes to race. There's tons of stuff that we call out when we're talking about how Black women are depicted, when we're talking about how gay people are depicted. Gay people have complained, gay men, Black gay men particularly, have complained about being seen as the honey child, Miss Thing. They get tired of that kind of trope. They complain about how they're being seen because that takes away their manhood. We all aren't that kind of feminine.
Diamond, the other thing is to keep in mind that we're not discussing either. There's a whole illusion and myth of what it is to be a man in Eurocentric thinking. So that also distorts the issue. If we have one, there's cultural things. Remember, we've been on this continent for 600 years. Right? 600 years ago, they started bringing us. That's one. Culturally, if you look at cultures pre-European, they don't think this way. And the other thing is the myth of being a man in America, which comes out all of this European thinking. So this is clouding the issue. And I wanted Cleo to speak to that because he has some background in it. So if he could just speak to that for the audience, because I think we need to understand that there's unnecessary division. And that's a lot of times because we don't know our history. We don't know that we've taken on other people's cultures and the damage that it's doing to us in so many different ways, because the issue shouldn't even be an issue if we were not influenced by Eurocentric thinking. So Cleo, can you take it from there? Cleo?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'll do my best, but I want to make sure that Diamond's thoughts were complete.
Okay.
I don't want to interrupt Diamond's.
Yeah, I just feel like we are not taking in consideration what the facts are in the cases of us being murdered. And so their jokes have consequences. And sometimes we have power to cancel people. Dave has not been canceled. He has been paid. He's going to continue to be paid. Other people have not been canceled. Look at the baby back on the road doing his thing. He got canceled from a couple of bookings. Now he back making his money. They don't really get canceled. They are rich people making their money. But these jokes,
what if they're not rich? What if they're just regular Joe people who are? And I'm going to let Cleo answer Linda's question, but we need to go out. So, I mean, Dave Chappelle brought us to this conversation, but I want us to talk about it from our perspective, just lay people who aren't rich, who, if you make these kinds of comments or any kind of comments, what are the repercussions? And also, if you all can explain for me, there seemed to be a feeling that Dave's jokes were more harmful to Black trans than to any other, to the larger trans community. And I didn't hear anything specifically that he said about Black trans. So in your answer, if you could address that too, that would be great. So Cleo, go ahead, please.
Okay, bear with me, please.
Yes.
I'm feeling a little sad because I want to honor the rage, grief, terror, and concern that I believe Diamond has regarding people like herself being murdered. I do not want to be dismissive and even come off for a second that doesn't matter to me, and that it's not heartbreaking to me. So I want to articulate that, and I'm feeling sadness because the issues, for example, that Linda wants me to address, which I'm going to do my best to do that in a quick way, are relevant to what I said earlier when you asked the first question about me giving my perspective on this, Helen, is that we have not been having a conversation as Black people about gender nuance, trans issues, and even same gender loving people. We have not been talking about that in very explicit, respectful ways as a people. And the reasons why are the underpinning to David Chappelle, among others, anxiety around the emasculation of Black men, which really concerns him. And the reason I believe that the baby, or Jonathan Kirk, which is his real name, out of the sky blue, talked about homosexuality, which was not even relevant to his concert or the place where he was at, is because he's living with some baggage around these issues that could be either molestation or his own sexual concerns about who he is. Because when you bring up these issues, when they're not the focus of the sky blue, when it's not even relevant to the circumstance, it's because you're personally dealing with it. And so I look at David Chappelle, Jonathan Kirk, AKA the baby, et cetera, as I look at everything through a historical, behavioral, cultural lens. Some of the things that I think Linda is referring to, and I'm gonna be relatively brief about this because I want to get back to the contemporary impact of us not knowing this. But if you understand the Dugon of Africa and people from Kemet, their relationship to what we call gender was not as frigid or as absolute or as constricting as what we have in this country, resulting from the Victorian era influence or making hard decisions around being quote unquote masculine or feminine. What's interesting and what's often missing from the contemporary complaint about so-called Black men killing trans people is that this is a relatively new phenomenon. This is not something that always occurred. There was a time, even when I was younger, and has any of you ever heard of Lady, God, what was her name?
Lady Chablis.
No, not Lady Chablis. This is way before Lady
Java.
Thank you. Thank Lady Java. When I was a child, Lady Java, Sir Lady Java, as they were called back then, but they're really transgender, which was not the word back then. It was all kinds of other words that were used as opposed to transgender, which came out of Germany, along with homosexuality and bisexuality, heterosexuality. All those words came out of German behavior scientists. But Sir Lady Java would be with another group of trans people in our community, living and breathing in Martin Luther King Day parades and doing all kinds of things as part of our community. And they were people that basically got respect. They definitely weren't attacked and killed. So Lady Java's still alive. And the more we go, as I said earlier in my talk, but not addressing Black anxieties, Black concerns, issues of gender, the more we accumulate misdirected rage and acting out. One of the things that's happening in our community that's resulting in Black people killing Black people, and this goes way beyond trans, but Black people killing Black people, and often those killers are men, but not always, is the contemporary impact of generational misdirected rage unresolved. And getting beyond that, one of the side effects of Black men having been castrated, been killed by the police, all kinds of stuff that has occurred to Black men, is a hyper concern about being man enough. And this is one of the misdirected rage, unfortunate side effects of Black men running around concerned about how they're seen as men in a patriarchal society, is them killing each other. That's why it's called gang violence. It's called all kinds of stuff where they're killing each other. That killing and destroying can go toward trans, it can go toward women, it can go all over the place because it's a phenomenon, a current pathology among Black men that has not been addressed. And instead of dealing with the consequences of being Black and male identified in a viciously patriarchal society that demoralizes and devalues Black men, we call people who try to talk, who act out their confusion along these lines transphobic, homophobic, femophobic, instead of looking at these issues through a Black historical contextual lens so we can resolve it. Going to the white LGBT mantra who have made trans issues part of the central stage because of their agenda to do that, Black people regurgitating their agenda instead of looking at these issues from a Black historical and contemporary and behavioral perspective only creates more division. The bottom line is that Black men are acting out, not all of us, but some of us are acting out some misdirected rage that can sometimes end in murder. That's the result of an unresolved, unaddressed conflict around being male and oppressed in this society. And we won't resolve this through doing this to Black men and going, you're killing people, you're transphobic, you're homophobic, because you're waving your finger at a group that's under attack. And been under attack. I mean, if you want to pull out pictures of murdered Black men in droves, hung, castrated, their penises cut off, and the contemporary version of that is police brutality. And there's some of us who are old enough to know that police brutality is not a new phenomenon. I mean, it just made the news because we have cell phones to show it. And I used to work in law enforcement, but we've been being murdered and castrated like that forever. And the white gay community, for example, when Ed Buck, who some of you may have heard of, had a Black murder machine in his living room, the gay community, who's worried about trans people supposedly, didn't say nothing.
That's just a lie.
That's not a lie.
That is a lie. Black queer people called out Ed Buck. Okay,
that's not what I said. So you misheard. That's why you're calling me a lie. I said the LGBT community, because I consider that a white phenomenon. I'm talking about the white power brokers who are complaining about and giving people license to complain about Black people being so-called trans. I know there were Black people who were a small group, a very, very small group of Black people in LA, because I was among that group with Jasmine Canick, et cetera, Diamond. A very, very small group of people who were concerned about the death of those men in Los Angeles. But from a collective white gay community perspective where these murders occurred, they didn't say anything.
Listen to me. So we know white racist gays exist. We know the white side of the LGBT community exists.
We don't all know that. We don't all know that.
Well, you're talking about it. So me and you know it. Me and you know it. So we know they exist. So great. Cool. In my mind, Black LGBT people, we do not have the social status, the social capita to shield us from the harmful Black men. We don't have, when we think of, you brought up Lady Java. She is still alive. Marsha P. Johnson is not alive. She was murdered. We don't know who. When we think about,
we do not know who.
We do not know who.
Whether they're Black or white, we don't know.
Right. When we think about Tyra Hunter, there was a Black EMT, when he cut off her clothes during an accident, stopped working on her, and she is dead now because the Black EMT said, oh shit, this is a man, and stopped actually doing his job because of his transphobia, and she is dead now. There have been multiple times that this type of rhetoric, anti-trans rhetoric, has led to our deaths. Multiple times. There's tons of cases. Braylon Stone in Arkansas was murdered by a guy who said, oh, I didn't want people to know, a Black man, I didn't want people to know about our relationship. So it's not, I have no, in this conversation, when we're talking about, my interest of being here is to stop violence against Black trans people particularly, I have literally no interest in holding white people accountable in this conversation, because they are not the ones who are harming us. It is y'all, period. Not you. When I say y'all, I mean Black men. That is the ones who are calling, who are harassing me on the train, because I am in community with you. So I want to know, why are you, Dave Chappelle, or you defending him, or whoever is adding to the culture, whether it be cisgender women, whoever, who is adding to the culture where that rage you're talking about is coming from y'all and coming to me. That's what I want to get to.
My quick answer to that is similar to what I said before. Black misdirected rage is coming at all kinds of Black people.
Yes.
And
we can't blame white people for it.
Well, but wait a minute. Let me finish. You give your perspective on that, and I'll give my perspective on this, because it's not simply an issue of blaming white people. It's contextualizing the source of the pathology. The source of Black misdirected rage in this society, you can argue all you want to, is the inferiority complex and the dehumanization, internalization of that perspective of Black people that came from racism. Every time let me finish, Diamond. Every time Black people have
talk a bunch.
every time Black people have successfully come together, have successfully been in communion regarding despite our differences, somebody, and it's typically white, comes and destroys it. That's a fact. You want to look at Move, you want to look at Black Wall Street, you want to look at Allentown, you want to look at Rosewood, you want to look at all kinds of systems. When we come together as a collective and build community, it's under attack. So that's just the way it is. And I'll reiterate the fact that trans people are far from being the most victimized people among Black folks. Black folks have been trained to victimize Black folks, and Black folks are doing it. Now, thank goodness, there's millions of exceptions to this. Not everybody Black is hurting other Black people, but a lot of Black people are hurting Black people because of misdirected rage. And as I said before, and if you don't understand this, I don't think we're going to be part of the solution. There's Black men. I know so many trans stories, including one like that you just got finished seeing, where I know several people who've gotten beaten up. They're not dead because I wouldn't be able to hear this story. But I know of trans people, and this is not the majority of the situations, but you just described one that's similar to this. I know of trans people who were dating a man who some of them will like to look at as heterosexual, because some of them think that a homosexual man is not man enough for them. They want to quote real man. So they date men who are quote unquote straight acting and heterosexual. And then these men decide that they want to leave them. And they say, if you leave me, I'm going to tell. And then because they threaten that they're going to tell, they get beat up or killed. Because these men, like so many Black men in the society, including among same gender loving men, are powerfully concerned about being seen as quote unquote men and respected as quote unquote men in this society. And it's the larger culture, Diamond, the white culture, that has deemed homosexuality bad, and that has deemed homosexuality a sign of stepping back from manhood into something else. You're old enough to know who Anita Bryant is. You're old enough to know who Jerry Falwell is. You're old enough to know who the anti-homosexual, anti-trans crusaders in this country are and were. None of them were Black. And when you come to Black people, like I said before, which people keep on missing from this discussion, that's so key, is that these pathological, unresolved brothers are acting out because they feel like their manhood is under attack. And it goes back to what Linda was saying earlier in terms of, well, what led to such a dysfunctional investment in so-called manhood constructs? Because a manhood construct that leads somebody to want to kill somebody because they're not stepping up to the construct, those constructs are externally influencing us. They're not Black. They don't come from the core of being Black. They come from being defensive in a white supremacist society that attacks Black people and that particularly attacks Black men. Sure, Diamond, you can look at this from an immediate perspective going, well, Black men are killing me. I want them to stop. Well, I want them to stop too, but they're not going to stop if we don't put them in context and engage them in terms of why they're doing what they're doing. Like I said about the baby when I was on television, I said, Canceling the baby, it does nothing. What you need to do is go to Jonathan Kirk and say, in a respectful way, not an attitudinal, attacking way, brother, why did you bring up homosexuality and sex in the park in the middle of your concert? That was not about sex in the park. Why did you bring that up? How did that come to your mind? And as I said before, if he has the capacity to articulate what came to mind, that will be very educational. But when we cancel everybody, and that's where the white people come in again, because they're the ones who are behind the cancel culture of Black men, including of David Chappelle. You got to remember that it was the HRC who the National Black Justice Coalition joined to try to get, which is a lily white organization, who tried to get David Chappelle canceled. It was a small Black organization which was founded by white gays, by the way, who joined the large white gay organization to try to cancel David. So you cannot separate whiteness from this. Yes, Black people should take responsibility for our behavior, but our behavior is a consequence of something that's not Black. And if I
is that the excuse you give with cisgender women? Is that so cisgender women who are being murdered and beat by their partner make that's the excuse, like, oh, the white man is on your back, so you kicking my ass at home. Like all of these things are about that toxic
I'm not giving excuses. I'm giving context. I'm not giving excuses.
It sounds like an excuse to me.
Well, I believe that it clearly does, because you want to say that all Black men are murdering trans, or that Black men are murdering trans. Well, I'm sorry, let me take that out so you won't be defensive. You said that Black men are trans, that we are murdering transgender women is what you said.
Mm-hmm. The ones that are dying.
But one thing I will say, since you brought up so-called cisgender, I don't use that terminology, but I know what it means. Since you brought up so-called cisgender women, white women are being murdered left and right by white men, left and right.
But I am invested in the lives of Black people. So why?
So am I, but I'm invested in not blaming Black people for everything too.
You're invested in the lives of Black men. From your conversation,
that's not true.
It sounds like you are invested in the lives of Black men.
But it's not true.
And that is fine.
I'm invested.
I'm
invested in us understanding why you are
Black
attacked.
Feminist theorists who have laid out how y'all tools and analysis are not sharp when it comes to things outside of race, because that is the predominant thing that is oppressing y'all. Y'all don't understand intersectionality to the context that we do, who hold other identities. And so I cannot sit here and listen to you. While I know the context of white supremacy, I know that part. But when it comes to the harm, the immediate harm to my people, and that means Black women, that means LGBT people, Black LGBT people. And for me, I feel like y'all are not held accountable for what you do. You blame it on that context. There is harm that you bring to us that have nothing to do with the white man. There's harm that you actually do, and you are not being held accountable. And when we called it out, you have tons of people coming up to you, coming to your defense. And so my main thing is I want you to see our humanity enough to care and understand that what people like Dave and people who are adding this negative miseducation and rhetoric, and we're not talking about you just disagreeing. We're talking about lies that you're telling. If you are doing that, you are undermining our humanity. It results in people dying. There are tons of cases, LGBT people, not just trans, Rakia Boyd. There's tons of people that are the cases where y'all have harmed us. Not the police officer, not the white police officer, not the white woman, We're not talking about them. We're talking about where Black men have harmed us. And to me, I think you're not seeing our humanity in the same way that we see you. When I see Philando Castile get murdered by that cop, I can see the humanity in that wrong, even through the harm that Black men have done me throughout my life. I can still see his humanity, but y'all can't see mine. because you're too busy blaming it on the context and the history and the white man on my back and what the white man has distorted in me. I don't care what he's distorted in you. I want you to care for me and see me. I want you to stop murdering me. I want you to stop hounding me at work. I want you to stop disrespecting me when I'm on the bus headed to work. I want you to treat me tender in the same way that I still come. I still come to the marches because I care. I have brothers. I have Black men that I care about. The ones that are, since I didn't say all Black men, the ones that are not murdering us, the one that treats me with care, the ones that are in my community taking care of me. I want the ones that are not doing that care, that are disrespecting me as I navigate the world. The ones that are beating my sisters and my mother and people, those men, I want y'all to hold them accountable for the harm that they do. It's not about the white man. I care about that when it's an issue that I need to think about the white people. But in this conversation, why I came here is because of what you all are doing to our community. Yes, we'll call out the white people when it's time, which we do. And if you follow me, you do. I do all the time. But in this conversation, I'm talking about how Black men contribute to the culture that doesn't allow people to see our humanity enough where they can kill us. They can leave us dead on the street.
Well, where we differ, can you hear me?
Yes.
Where we differ, if we differ at all, Diamond, is that everything you said without exception is being done to Black people, all kinds of Black people, by Black people. And when it comes to proportion,
it's almost like you're all lives mattering me right now.
Well, I can't help how you talking about. I'm talking about Black folks. When people say all life matters, they're talking about white people. I'm not talking about white people. You don't want to talk about them anyway, and I don't really want to dwell on them either, though they are the context in which we live. We live in a white supremacist society. That's a fact. A white patriarchal supremacist society is where we all live, including you. Let me finish my thought.
Even in the context of, like, let's say beauty standards, we know that European beauty standards affects us, absolutely. But we also know that there is a context. Like when we think about the skinny white girl with no booty, Black men has always, and women always have like this some level of booty. We have always had even within the context of white supremacist idea of beauty, we had our own little thing going on. Affected by it, yes, but we still had our own thing. And so we're not affected to the point where I'm not going to hold you accountable for what you are doing to
accountability. Accountability is an issue we can talk about if you like, Diamond, but I'm not talking about, and I would never suggest to you that we don't hold nobody accountable. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that Black people, because of misdirected rage, because of generational unresolved pathological issues, are hurting Black people. And I'm saying that transgender people do not have all that real estate. I'm saying that the attacks on Black people that are leading to murderous outcomes in some instances goes way beyond trans. There's more Black men killing each other than killing trans people. And that's a fact. Trans people are about this much of that population. Most of the other people that Black people are killing in the Black community context are other Black men. That's a fact. And most of the people who have been murdered in the Black community by a long shot are Black men, in numbers way beyond the numbers that are impacting trans people. And all those numbers matter to me. I believe that the same kind of disrespect that you want to that you want to resolve, I want to resolve it too, but not just for you. I want to resolve for all of us. Because I have, let me finish. This is my final comment on this. I could say to you without stuttering a litany of attacks that have happened to me by Black men, and Black women too, by the way, but by Black people. Horrible, painful, disruptive, destructive things. As a matter of fact, but I put it in context, I don't do a lot of Black blaming like I hear other people do. The majority of the people that have impeded with my success, who tried to destroy me and attack me and hurt me and do vicious things to me, have been physically Black people, because that's where I hang out. I don't hang out in white places. They don't have access to me in a direct way, though they indirectly are running the whole thing. But Black people, as I said earlier in what I said, are going through some things that are leading to destruction between us that we need to work on. And I think it's important to resolve it with context. What's missing from the one-liner of Black men are hurting me is context. And you can't, that's like trying to go somewhere without a map. This is not an issue of trying to put everything on the hands of white people and not make us accountable. It's an issue of understanding cause and effect. What we do because of this, and this is the effect. If we don't talk about cause and effect, all we're going to do is be in argumentative chaos with each other as a people. And I can tell you from work that I've done for many years, that's not helpful. What creates compassion between different types of Black people, including trans people, and I've actually witnessed this, is when we understand why we do what we do, so we can become allies for each other. I'm talking about in a Black kind, I'm talking about nobody else now. I'm talking about Black people. I've been in meetings where somebody Black was attacking somebody else Black who didn't understand what they had gone through, and they were at each other, and I helped them to both look at, okay, why don't we all understand why each other does what each other does, so we can not pour more gasoline on the conflict and understand why we do what we do. And that's the only reason why I bring in, and that's the only context when I do bring in the white supremacist and patriarchal overlay that is part of why we do what we do, why we call each other the N-word, why we call each other bitches and hoes. All that stuff is literally part of an external system that is encouraging that kind of behavior to occur among and between Black people. And if we don't look at those sources, we can't resolve it. We have to look at those things. We got to look at cause and effect. And when you tell an oppressed group, which in this time, I'm talking about Black men, that you're killing us, sister, that is not going to stop them from killing you. Because they're killing you because they done lost their minds because of oppression. And that oppression needs to be addressed, or else we can forget it.
I know Kay has been trying to talk, Lola was trying to have her hand up in a minute, and Demetrius too. And I just think maybe I made a mistake by not starting this thing off right. And, if we want to talk about what Dave Chappelle, what the furor seems to be over Dave Chappelle, in my opinion, it seems as though the angst is that he brought up topics that are not comfortable to vocal members of the community. And he pointed out that there's racism. And for those of you who don't know, who didn't watch the special, I had no idea who DaBaby was either, but DaBaby made some comments that were insulting to the community. And there was this move to cancel him or to have him go away. And what Dave Chappelle shared with us was like, okay, but he killed a Black man and he wasn't canceled for that. So like that life didn't matter.
But even that is a gaslight, because Black men being murdered stopped the world. When has the last queer person stopped the world in the way that George Floyd did, in the way that Martin Luther King did, in the way that the attack on Rodney King did? We always show up for Black men. I have marched all my life for Black men. My first interaction with a death was my uncle being murdered by cops. So I understand we always show up for Black men, but we have to, because of that, everybody else is in the shadows. Everybody else is in the shadow. We had to create hashtags, say her name, just for us to talk about the Black women who are murdered by cops. There literally was a Black trans man, Tony McDade, murdered by the cops in the same week that George Floyd was murdered. We always show up for Black men. And I'm not talking about white people. I'm talking about people who are under Black men, Black women, LGBT people, everybody. We always show up for them. But when they do harm for us, it's like, oh, the white man, misdirected rage.
To that point, Diamond, at the end, for those of you, I hope you watched the special, at the end of the special, Dave Chappelle is critical of the community for not showing up for Diamond. He all but accuses the community of being responsible for her death. For those of you who didn't see the special, Dave Chappelle at the end talks about a trans woman who he had befriended, and because she supported him, the community came after her with all furor, and she ends up taking her life.
That is a lie. So first of all, that is somebody that I am very connected to Daphne. So the idea that he's selling that she killed herself because of community is a lie. That is just a lie.
Okay. Okay, let me just go to some questions here. Kay, I know you've been waiting to get in, and Demetrius, I don't know if Lola still has a question, and Myra, I see you. Kay, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So when I was first approached about this topic, I didn't feel it was my place to speak because I am not a Black trans woman. I am a Hispanic trans woman. And I felt that the best person to speak on this topic, because she's very knowledgeable, was and is Diamond Stylz. I've been following her for years. I get all of my trans information, especially how it affects the trans community. I've researched, I've done papers on it. I've actually benefited from the entire prom situation because of her case. So I follow Diamond for years, but my whole point is this was my thing about this whole conversation. We're speaking of the damage that Dave Chappelle's rhetoric of claiming to be a TERF, of claiming his anti-trans stance, and the effect that has on the population, which, let's be honest, a lot of it's the Black community, most Black men who are the #1 killers of Black trans women often suffer from. So he puts out this rhetoric that it is okay, and Daphne was a white woman. She doesn't experience the same situations that a Black trans woman would feel. Like they're two different things. So
She is a white woman comedian.
Yeah.
Trying to be in the same career as Dave. She has vested interest in supporting him.
But she supported him, and all I have is his version of the story, right? And there was no empathy. So now she's gone. Like the way that he described it, and tell me if this was right or wrong, that she was so taunted by the community that they came at her so strong that she just threw in the towel. And he has stepped up to take care of her daughter, and he said, what have you all, and he didn't say it, but he implied, what has the community done for Daphne? So I think what I heard Dave saying, and please, those of you who saw this special step in, what I heard Dave doing was calling out, you're talking about one issue, which I don't discount at all, Diamond, but what I heard from this special of Dave was he was calling out, not only did he call out the community, he called out feminists, he called out Jewish people with that whole space Jew joke. He called out, some of the jokes that he made were offensive to Black people. And I think what he's saying is, why is there some need to provide this extra layer of protection to the community? And what I hear Cleo saying is that we're all hurting one way or another. And why is one group off limits to satire, to comedy, to whatever the case may be, and no one else is? I even heard.
And who is saying that?
That's the perception. That's a perception.
But nobody is saying that. And if you think that I'm sitting on here as a Black woman and I'm not offended when rude jokes are made about Black women,
but
I'm offended by jokes that are made about.
That's not what she said. That's not what she said. What she said was that Jews, white folks who we talked about how they can't age well, and all kinds of people were talked about, laughed about, joked about, lots of people, including Black people, during his stand-up. But trans people are the main ones, if not the only ones, creating a spectacle, a justice spectacle in response to Dave. That's what Helen just said. And the answer to
we are not the only ones. There are lesbians. He actually talked about beating the shit out of a lesbian, a masculine woman as well. And there are masculine lesbians who are talking about how they were offended by that too.
But that's relatively speaking, that's minor compared to the big platform that the trans issue has gotten. We can't deny that. You are the one who has to remind us about the masculine, lesbian, identified woman, et cetera, because the media and most of the talk is about trans. And the reason most of the talk is about trans is because the white gay community made a decision to put trans issues on center stage to address towards social justice reasons for trans. That's what we talk. That's what we call people cis now. That's what we're talking about, pronouns now. All that stuff is white gay power being able to override everything else and put their agenda because of their power and weight behind a issue. That's why David and others, including me, who have said, okay, we got a dude named Jonathan Kirk, who's called the baby, who then murdered another brother, who calls women bitches and calls black people the N-word and does all this derogatory stuff that's anti-black, then there's no cancellation being called.
So
because black people don't have the machinery that the white gays have.
So why are we not canceling him? So why are we not canceling him? Why are we not canceling the baby for his misogyny? Why are we not canceling all the rappers for their misogyny? Why are we not doing that?
Well, what I've done, see, I don't own Netflix. You know, I don't have a major network like that. But what I've done in my own work, Diamond, is I've called into the community forums, rappers, and people who say these derogatory things.
I'm not talking about you specifically. I'm talking about culturally. Why are we not canceling the rappers who are using misogynistic stuff? Why are we not canceling them?
Well, first of all, we don't own the press, Diamond. If a whole bunch of us wanted to do that, and there's people that do, we may not ever find out because we don't own the press. The press is the one who creates the narrative. They want to create. They're the ones who are controlling of what we talk about and don't talk about, because they put it on a high level that's why we're talking about trans now, because they want to talk about it.
Right. So I can, as a Black trans woman, I cannot control what the collective group of Black people try to cancel. Look, we canceled Delaney when she was talking about yellow bones, and she was a rapper. We canceled her when she was when she was a light-skinned rapper when she was talking about colorism. We canceled her. We canceled Kramer when he was saying nigger on his comedy show. Why all of a sudden we don't have the power to cancel people? We do have the power to cancel people.
We have a lot of power now. I mean,
so why are we not wielding it? Why is it now that it's being wielded towards us? All of a sudden, it's like, oh, we are focused on the trans people. We have tons of power. I'm a Black person with on all these intersections. Why can't we cancel people who are doing these bad things?
Diamond, I don't think you like the answer to the question. The answer to the question is because white people control the narrative. That's why. And when Black people step up to try to do anything that's going to be yielding something that's going to benefit Black people, they not only get canceled, they're not even allowed in center stage to even make a comment. The only people that are allowed to have a major platform to talk about anything is white people and Black people who white people approve of.
I'm sorry, but why is it the trans people's fault for all of this publicity for Dave Chappelle, but when it comes to all of these other issues, it's the white people's fault? I'm confused by that, because you're saying, so, you know, all of this stuff about how we're trying to cancel Dave Chappelle, the trans people are trying to cancel Dave Chappelle, but it's not the trans people who are speaking. So it's I see a lot of people in the comments blaming the trans community for somewhat canceling Dave Chappelle. So it's our fault that we are so offended by this. But then you're stating that
I do something that Diamond doesn't like. I'm not blaming Black people for any of this. The cancellation.
You're saying that there's no power in your voices or whatever, but it's the white media that does all of this, but we're blaming the trans community for this situation.
No, not me. That's not what I said. Let me articulate, and I can do it really quickly. Let me articulate what I have said and what I have said consistently, including on this show. I am not blaming trans. The people who have put trans issues in the middle of this conversation aren't even trans.
Yeah.
It's the white LGBT collective who have tentacles everywhere in the media, who have made a decision to put trans issues central to the US conversation, and they did that.
For instance,
And it's certainly not Black trans who
you
have
literally have
trying to
Stacy here
cancel.
who says that we're the most sensitive group on earth. Literally, Stacy literally just said we're the most sensitive group on earth, and there's only 1.7 million of us.
Okay, all right, Kay, I hear you.
I sure did. I sure did. I said it, and I'll say it vocally too, because the people who actually wrote a letter to Netflix was a small handful of executives of gay organizations who wrote the letter, right, and who have the power. So we don't even know if their views reflect the entire group of trans. No, they're the ones who had the power to try to make something happen. On top of that, they when Good Morning America puts the leader of the walkout, the Netflix walkout, that's giving them a platform. That's the media focusing on what the media wants to focus on, which is trans agenda.
But it's the whole trans group, and we're all sensitive. Think about what you just wrote there. You said we're the most sensitive group.
Because
you literally
this
just
issue's
said
against us. I'm sensitive about when what's that IMAS dude called nappy head holes. I was sensitive about that.
So was I.
There's tons of things that I'm going to be sensitive about because I stand at the intersections of many things. You're going to be sensitive about the stuff that affects you. What do you mean?
Let me get some of these other questions then. Demetrius, your hand has been up for a minute. Go ahead, please.
How you doing? My name is Demetrius Robinson, and I'm a straight male, but I want to first acknowledge Diamond's concern. As a Black man, I just want to acknowledge that you do have other Black men who do attack, and even talking about attacking trans women. And speaking on Cleo's point, I deal with juveniles in the Juvenile Justice Commission or juvenile justice system. And as far as their masculinity, at a very delicate point in their lives, the teenage lives, they deal with the developmental part of their masculinity, or, growing into it, as looking at the opposite. If it's anything that's opposite of what they're trying to be, it's a threat. And there's men who have not matured to that point. I remember age 19, working in Philadelphia at the post office. I used to work 11 to 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning. And I used to walk through what people would consider the gated community. And I would be, people be approaching me all the time. But because my masculinity, which, I don't believe in toxic masculinity, that's a whole nother discussion. But because I was firm in who I was, and I love Black people in general, I didn't approach or respond in a very negative way. And what needs to happen is we need to understand that we have to train Black men, not only about the context of our history, which Linda and Cleo spoke about, but we also have to address what is really a threat to our masculinity. And again, people have misunderstandings. And again, I acknowledge, Diamond, that there are Black men who do attack for whatever reason, whether they voluntarily get into relationships with trans women, knowing that they're trans and not wanting to be outed, or people who don't know it's a trans woman because that trans woman may not have been open for whatever reason. And then that person, reacts in a very violent way. And there's no excuse for any of that. But as Black folks, we do have to address that. And I think as many layers, like Cleo mentioned, and I understand when we talk about it in a broad sense, it does diminish the immediate, but it has to be talked about on a broad sense, and it has to be addressed on the micro level as well. And again, the most powerful tool that has been used against Black people and continue to be used against Black people is divide and conquer. One of the things that I like about or love about Black Lives Matter is because they run down a whole litany of which communities are all the communities that it represents. And when it talks about the gay, bisexual, and trans community, my thing is, I'm not of that community, but we are Black. And at any point, if we show division amongst ourselves, they're gonna utilize that. I don't care if it's the feminist, quote unquote, feminist movement, if it's the trans movement, we have to understand the full context. But again, like you said, Diamond, we also have to address the ills within our community and the things that we're doing to one another. But it has to be looked at in a broader context.
I have to be sensitive to every issue at every intersection that I live. So if I hear something being pointed at cisgender women, black, I'm going to be sensitive about that. When Megan Thee Stallion got shot and the rhetoric around her and defending the man who shot her, I am sensitive about that. The difference is, Stacey, you have the luxury of not being trans, so you don't need to be sensitive about my issue. But as us being both black women, I have to be as sensitive about that. I have to be as sensitive about black men being murdered because I know by the cops, because I know that if they will murder him, they will murder me. I have to be sensitive about all of these things. So of course, if you want to claim I'm the most sensitive because I have so many intersections that I'm sensitive about, yes, I'll be sensitive because I care about all Black people. You do not. You don't care about me.
Well,
because if you cared about me, you would be offended by what was said by Dave Chappelle. Period.
Well, the thing is,
I was offended by what the baby said. I was offended. I'm offended by misogynistic lyrics.
I think you're absolutely right in regards to your sensitivity because of the intersectionality that you have, your perspective, your positionality. It is true. And that's something, unfortunately, that you have to carry. But once you carry that, and if you're blaming a group of individuals who are part of that intersectionality, I can understand where people have to defend themselves. My thing is, I'm not in a position to have to defend myself as a Black man. My thing is, I understand, not fully, but I understand that we have to address your concern. And Dave Chappelle, again, I'll be transparent. I love Dave Chappelle. Did I always love Dave Chappelle as a comedian? No, I did not. Does he make you think? Yes, he does. Did I like some of the comments that he made on his shows about the stock market going up if Black folks got reparations and fried chicken and Cadillacs will go up in stock when people are really truly fighting for reparations? But the thing is, he makes you think about certain things. And yeah, I'm positive that what he mentioned offended people, but does he deserve to be canceled? Is it deserve for him to be disrupted? So we, just like James Baldwin, right behind you, your left shoulder, he mentions that to be Black in America means that you're going to be in a constant rage. To be Black, trans, woman, I can't imagine the rage that you have. But that rage, even as a Black man that Cleo spoke about, that we have to hold that in check. If not, we will turn against each other more so than what Cleo mentioned, the system that made this all possible in regards to even us thinking the way we think, us speaking English. And Linda spoke about just prior to, and again, I'm not doing this to diminish what is going on today, but I visited Ghana and I observed and studied African spirituality. And what really helped me understand my biases as far as the Black and gay and trans community is understanding male and female energy, masculine and feminine energy. And there were people who wore lipstick and had children, had relationships with a woman and vice versa. You cannot argue against energy. Energy is energy. But in this country, when we attach feminine energy to sexuality. I had to have a conversation with my son when he was in middle school. He said, "Dad, it's this boy that's gay in my school, in my classroom. He danced around gay." Again, I'm a straight male. I said, how do you know he's gay? Did you see him having sex with another boy? Oh, no, Dad. He was just the way he danced. I said, listen, he may have feminine tendencies, or he just liked to dance. Don't call him gay. And I had to straighten out my own son, because the fact that as a Black man, I love my Black people. I don't want us to misuse terms. Even, if somebody says I'm transphobic, I'm not transphobic. I'm not scared of the trans community. I'm not scared. If I speak out of misunderstanding, that's a one thing. Miseducation or insecurity, we have to address that. And those are the things that we have to address amongst our people.
It's just like when Stacey says that, you know, controlling and silencing people who have opposition. Look, Trump got canceled from Twitter, but he still has a platform of his own. There are going to be consequences to what you say if somebody has enough power to silence you. Nobody has control over how far that's go. You don't know how far that's going to go. Everybody has the potential when you say something offensive to get canceled, period. And even me, me personally, I'm not calling for Dave to get canceled.
That's one of the things that people are happy about that's happening with Dave Chappelle, because it's not just this situation. I think what people have seen that Dave Chappelle has done has, you know, we either have freedom of speech in this country or we don't. And Dave Chappelle is challenging that. Dave Chappelle is saying, yeah, that's my perception, Diamond. I think that he is
freedom of speech is to protect you from the government. It doesn't protect you from the court of public opinion. Okay, and it doesn't protect you from consequences.
Come on, we have college campuses that, okay, well, I'm gonna let other people talk. Myra, your hand has been up for a minute, and Pierre, you're next. Go ahead, Myra.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I hope I haven't forgotten what I was gonna say.
Sorry.
But during that discussion about sensitivity, one thing that I thought about that is a big part of the problems that we're discussing is insensitivity. And I'm speaking of my own insensitivity. I had already watched the Dave Chappelle comedy thing before you sent out the notice and wanted us to watch it. So when I watched it, the idea that people were going to be calling for him to suffer some consequence didn't occur to me, because I heard it, but it was a comedy show and he was joking. And I just didn't think that he had said anything that was going to cause the kind of discussion that we've had today. Or cause people to want something to happen to him, for him to lose something because of what he said. Because I've heard so many other comedians do the same thing, and not the same wording, but saying things that were offensive to people. And so I'm thinking that if people watched it like I did and weren't sensitive, you know, like if I had known in advance what we were going to talk about, I probably would have listened more closely and tried to put some type of analysis to it. But since I was just watching for entertainment, I just wasn't sensitive to some of the things that he said. I just listened and went on. I laughed if I thought it was funny, and if I didn't, I didn't. It just wasn't a big deal to me. And I'm thinking that I'm not alone in looking at it that way by white people, because I'm sure more of them watched it than we did, and by Black people. And so a lack of sensitivity, I think, is a big part of the problem. And I accuse myself of having that lack of sensitivity. That's pretty much all I wanted to say, except the things I forgot.
Thank you, Myra. Pierre, you're next. Pierre.
Yes, I'm here. Yeah, I was saying that. Well, I was thinking that instead of it man, yeah, instead of approaching, you know, Dave Chappelle or anybody with, you know, more aggressiveness or more confrontation and conflict, did communities like ever think of forgiving him publicly? Because we're all Black, like we said. Imagine if a group of Black people forgave one of us and said, "Hey, let's educate him. He didn't know," or let's just educate him. He knew, but he didn't really know. Because how can he really know? He's not a trans woman. So if people just like really sat down, talked, and forgave him and approached it that way, the media wouldn't have the fuel to continue the conversation of negativity. It would be like, oh wow, they're dealing with it within their own community. What are we gonna do? You understand what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Yeah, there's a problem with that interesting suggestion that you made that a lot of people don't want to face. And I'll contextualize what I'm saying this way. I've been very vocal about this whole thing and been on some shows, TV shows, podcasts, etc. And my Facebook page, which is very active anyway, was even more active. And a young same-gender loving Black man, because I didn't agree with David Chappelle being canceled, which people assume meant that I supported everything he said, which is completely untrue. I had problems with some of the things that he said, and I've since got an opportunity to articulate that. But I don't agree with canceling. He got on my page and he said, Black man, no, he said, how dare you support David Chappelle? Black men like David Chappelle are murdering Black trans women daily. How dare you support David Chappelle? And my response to him was, well, first of all, you should probably read FBI surveillance reports and statistics, and you will realize that trans people are not being killed daily. That's not true. And there are people who are being killed daily, and they mostly look like David Chappelle. So it's interesting that you would say what you said, because it's not couched in truth. And the reason I raise that here is because this society has successfully, for a long time now, created a dehumanizing, callous, evil perspective of Black men. So before people could even do what you just got finished suggesting, which is quote unquote forgive, which was your suggestion, that's not the terminology I would use in terms of dealing with David. We have to look at the hatred toward Black men. Where there's blatant evidence of the hatred toward Black men is if you read who's being murdered, or if you look at who the police department continues to murder unarmed in disproportionate numbers. That looks like who's really being murdered the most in this country. Now, that doesn't make it unimportant to focus on trans Black people, et cetera. We should definitely focus on stop trans people not being murdered, et cetera. But I'm gonna go back to what I said before, is that there's a lot of murder happening in our community that we need to take a look at because of the misdirected rage that anti-Blackness, which comes from a white source, puts in Black people. So we have a hard time coming up with this whole idea of doing anything positive for Black people, because we have a lot of myths. One of the myths is that everybody's coming to the rescue of Black men. That's not true. The only reason that we're talking about.
I mean, I'm Haitian. Like, it's not. Everyone has their soapbox to stand up and say, "Hey, feel bad about this for me." Everyone has it. Every single human being can do that. But instead of trying to, again, this not forgive. Like, literally sit down with the person, find out exactly what they meant, find out exactly where they're coming from. And it's not a forgiving, it's both people sitting down and educating each other in terms of what they were thinking, because we're all this color.
Yes.
We're all Black. It's not complicated, but instead people always, unfortunately, make it complicated by making it something where it's like, oh, no, you should care about me more. No, you should care about me more. It's like, everyone has something to say. Everyone. Instead of it doing like that, hey, let's be the difference. Let's be the different type of people that talk to each other and say, we're going to fix it within our own community. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I agree with you, Pierre, and that's similar to what I'm suggesting, in that it doesn't make any sense for a bunch of people who are disproportionately murdered to have an oppression contest. We need to all get together and look at how we can deflect each other being murdered. We need to all look at how there's femophobia in our community and how patriarchy teaches us to not value the lives of feminine people, male and female. We need to look at the external sources that teach us to be at each other's throats and understand them, so we won't perpetuate them. And we have to look at how we co-dehumanize each other. Because, for example, in my case, and I'm just talking about me now, I have been, Diamond, I think it was Diamond or somebody brought up the Rutgers situation and the nappy-headed hole situation. If Diamond knew me, and she just meeting me, she would know that when it came to that issue and so many issues about Black people being attacked, Black women being attacked, I'm on top of it as a concern. I joined the Stop the Violence Against Women movement when I was 17, when I was an undergrad in college. And I've been working about Black men against rape and work on behalf of deflecting the mistreatment of feminine people all of my life. But when people see me, they see a Black man and they come to all kinds of conclusions because they've been very well trained to look to dehumanize me. And we've been very trained to dehumanize each other. And everybody wants to win the oppression contest instead of looking at each other and unlearning the external messages, which do not come from us originally, but come from external sources that has us at each other's throat instead of talking with each other. Like I said about David, instead of canceling him, what we should be doing is using what he has stimulated in our community to have some conversations that are long overdue, that as a result of us not having them, we still have conflict. I don't want to feed into some more dehumanization of each other, including Black men, what we supposedly all do, or most of us do, whatever. That's not helpful. I just want to be helpful. And I know enough about communication between us as a people to be helpful, as opposed to re-traumatizing Black people. We keep on re-traumatizing each other inadvertently because we are in our own kind of pain, and we want to win the look at me contest. But I'm here to tell you, all kinds of Black people are being murdered, from people who are not
They're
Black,
all lives mattering,
and for people who are Black. No, all life matters is white people, Diamond, trying to take away the Black focus. I'm not doing that. I'm talking about an all Black focus. And all Black lives do matter to me. All Black lives matter to me. Yes. But I'm not doing the all life matters to me. I'm talking about Black
You're
people.
doing the all Black lives matter to me. That's what you're doing. That's
part of what I'm doing.
That's in an ideal world. In an ideal world, we want all Black lives to matter. But we know in the Black community, erase white.
In my world, it's the truth.
Take what in our world, there is a hierarchy of which Black lives we care about. And it is usually Black men that is given the grace, that is given the spirit of all of us to stand behind him. When y'all get murdered, we go to the streets. It is not George Floyd. Somebody said George Floyd was extraordinary. We did it for Trayvon Martin. We did it for Rodney King. We've done this multiple times for y'all. When was the last queer person, that Black queer person, that we went to the street for?
Breonna Taylor. Sandra, what was the school teacher's name there? What was it? Cleo,
Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor died 2 weeks before George Floyd, and they didn't go to the streets until he died. It's always in relation to a Black man. Same thing with Sandra Bland. It's always until we have to make hashtags and say her name, because her name wasn't being said. It is always Black men that we are fighting for. It is always, there is a hierarchy in which Black lives matter the most. And it's just the truth. It's not about playing Oppression Olympics. It's just about the facts. There is Oppression Olympics. We don't care about all Black lives, and making it seem like we care about them equally is just not right. It's just not cool.
Well, I only can speak for me, and I believe I care about it equally. But I also know that the reason that Black men get a lot of focus in this society is not, excuse me, let me back up, because Black men don't get a lot of focus. The reason that a lot of men get focus in this society is because of patriarchy. The reason why Black men get some focus is because Black men have killed the most. The reason why Black men get some focus historically is because they killed Malcolm, they killed Martin, they compromised Marcus Garvey, they murdered Medgar Evers. So there's been all these high profile murders of well-known Black men relative to Black women. Fannie Lou Hamer was beat damn near to death, but she lived. So the people whose bodies been rolled out in caskets over and over again, Nat Turner, we can go on and on, has been a lot of Black men. That's not me designing that. Patrice Lumumba, we can go on and on and on. So we're not the ones controlling this narrative. Black men and women are literally being turned against each other. We are literally being trained to look at white people as who our choices should be to love, care about, and respect. And the whole concept of Black on Black loyalty, which is going to be part of our solution, is under direct attack. You can't even find an authentically Black, dual parented Black personality anywhere in television anymore. They either got a white parent or they could pass for white across the street. And Black people are not the ones who are designing any of this. Corporate America and the white-owned media don't care about us. How they show us is based on their agenda and what they're trying to do. And what they're doing, because their numbers are lower and they can't reproduce like other people, particularly Black people, they're attacking Black loyalty. So even this trans conversation, like I said before, is highlighted because they decided to highlight it. In Baltimore, Maryland, where I do a lot of work, where there's the killing of Black people in generally every weekend. They have a program called Baltimore Ceasefire, and the focus is not trans. The focus is Black people. The only group that has a big old sign talking about lives matter is the trans community. There's a big sign about a block from my house in Baltimore, which is a predominantly Black community, where there's this huge trans Black Lives Matter sign. There is no Black Lives Matter sign that size, because the Black community doesn't have a white machine behind it like the trans community does. And this is
what y'all do, even with
the truth.
Me Too, even with Me Too, y'all will say, oh, we wouldn't be hearing about these Black cases if it wasn't for the white women celebrities who started. I don't care what collection of power allowed us to focus on the Black women who have been sexually assaulted and raped.
I don't like the fact that they're controlling our narrative. I don't like it. And we need to stop being passive.
The narrative
about external
is that
people
we need
controlling
to stop
our
women
narrative
from being
and them controlling what we care about. It's not a good idea for white folks to control what Black people care about.
Yeah,
White people should not control what we care about and what we think matters. They shouldn't be the ones that control that, and they are.
And we're falling in line. Lola, you had your hand up for a minute. Lola. You need to unmute, Lola.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I want to thank Cleo for his explanation. I like the fact that he brought up the dehumanization of Black people. For several years, we've been dehumanized. And when we first started talking about police brutality and the killings of Black men, we heard them respond to us that Black people were killing Black people. And I'm using that as an analogy here. If at that time when they said Black people were killing Black people, should we have then dropped the larger issue of police killing Black people? No, that's the way I feel about it. We'll deal with Black people killing Black people at some other time. That's relevant, but it's not relevant to the fact that they were killing Black men, that the police were killing Black men. So now, with the Dave Chappelle issue, the fact that, yeah, Black trans women are being killed is relevant, but we shouldn't get involved in infighting over that issue and competing as to who got killed the most. We've all been victimized. And I think we should look at the broader issue. Should we cancel Dave Chappelle and start canceling Black men because we don't agree with what they're saying, or should we address the issue, the broader issue of the dehumanization of Black people and everything that's led to Black men doing whatever it is they're doing wrong? I think we should try to understand and deal with the bigger picture rather than fight within our own group. That's just the way I feel. It saddens me when I see us fighting over, who's more oppressed than the other. We are all oppressed. That's just.
There's some people who are oppressed more.
And it's not
Well,
trans
I don't
people.
want to get into that contest. I'm a Black woman. Not only am I a Black woman, I'm a Black woman who comes from a foreign country. I've experienced oppression in America at different levels. And I'm not going to compete with anybody about that. That's not a trophy I'm looking for. I just want to, I care when people are getting killed.
Intersectionality is about. White women, that's what white women said too during the feminism
But you
movement.
know what, then
all are oppressed.
educate them. Educate them. If people don't understand, it's not the life they have lived. I mean, sometimes it's better to just educate. People in America tend to be, there's all kinds of prejudices in this country. So I have my own issues. I have false prejudices that you would not be able to relate to. And if you say something that offends me, I would want to educate you rather than cancel you. I do not understand this canceling. It doesn't solve any problem. At the end of the day, if we say we want to deal with the other issues that just pertain to certain people, by the time we get to the broader issues, we'd have nobody with platforms to even speak for us. If we cancel people like Dave Chappelle and whoever is out there, all of the prominent black people who can actually get the messages across, if we cancel them all, we'll have nobody later on to even speak for us.
I just hope you are this lenient when it's something against you.
Oh, see, that's where we differ. I don't just fight for me. I fight for everybody. When I think about these issues, I think about.
I've said multiple times that I fight for everybody. So I don't know how that.
But
you
that's
got that
not
we differ.
That's not what I'm hearing now, because you're saying you only care about the trans people right now, and you don't want to
say that.
Okay, well, but that's what I hear when I'm listening to your argument with Cleo. It's like he's thinking of a broader picture. Let's look at the whole thing. Let's look at why men are doing this. If men are doing whatever it is, let's look at it and educate them. And I think that's relevant to all of us. If we're thinking about all of us, we should want to do it that way.
Helen,
because then we will all benefit.
Can I just say, I thank both Cleo, and I'm saying your names alphabetically, okay? I thank Cleo and Diamond for being here and for educating all of us. I think, quite frankly, that you both are saying the same thing, and I'll tell you what I hear. Diamond, what I hear you saying is that you are against violence against Black women. That's what I hear you saying, not just trans women, but Black women as well. And that comes in any form of violence. And I also hear you saying that much of that violence against Black women is happening in our own community at the hands of Black men. And I agree with you. I agree with you. And trans women are being killed as well. I agree with Cleo when he says more Black men are dying. I'm originally from Philadelphia, born and raised. And I think as of this week, 443 or more Black people have died as a result of gun violence. And the majority of them have been Black men, although Black women have died as well. And also in Philadelphia, there have been, notorious, ugly murders of trans women. So it's a real issue. What I hear Cleo saying is that the violence being perpetuated by Black men has a context. And to the extent that you don't know that context, we won't even know where to start to solve it. I don't hear it as an excuse. I hear it as we've got to understand it in order to eliminate it. What I also hear him saying,
Right.
what I think I hear him saying, because I too watched Dave Chappelle's special, because I had heard all the fury about it, and I wanted to understand what was going on. And what I think I hear Cleo saying, in light of what I think I heard Dave Chappelle saying, is that there's a broad transgender or larger LGBTQ INA force that's out there that can destroy people. And what I think I heard Dave Chappelle saying, and what I think I heard Cleo saying, is that is a dangerous force, and that anybody can be destroyed. And I think what I heard Helen saying is that it is that force that he's against, and it's the force that killed Daphne. And I know, Diamond, that you said you don't think it's that group, but I'm not sure, as I understand through Dave Chappelle's eyes and through listening to Cleo, as I understand their definition of that group, it's a largely white group. And I know you identify with that group, but I'm not sure that you're part of that group. I think it's just a white group that controls the narrative and destroys people. Like, remember when they tried to destroy Kevin Hart? They were on the way to canceling him because of something he had said years ago. And when he was asked to host, was it the Oscars or some award program, he was made to apologize, or he was given that ultimatum, and he said, I made my apologies years ago, screw y'all. And he didn't do it. So, and he has bounced back from that. But Dave Chappelle, look what we're doing as a result of what Dave Chappelle said. We are having a teachable moment, and we are all talking about something that's very, very serious. And I will tell you, in terms of Black men hating not just trans women, but gays, period. I grew up with that. I'm a child of the 60s, I guess the late 60s, because I was born in 54. But I'm a child of that era where Black men didn't stutter. They don't like gays. And I didn't grow up in the era where they hurt them. I mean, I could be wrong, but I see that, or maybe I'm hearing about it as a relatively new phenomenon. And when I say new, I mean in the last 20 years, maybe. And Diamond, Cleo, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think that I just finished watching, Cleo, you said you're from Baltimore, you live in Baltimore. I just finished watching The Wire again, because I didn't tune in when everybody tuned in. So now I had to, and I went straight to season 4 and 5. And when Michael K. Williams died, I said, I really need to go back and pay respect to him. And his character was gay. And I'm wondering if you talk about intersectionality, Diamond, the intersection between a violent gay Black man who was killing up everybody who he saw as his enemy. I'm wondering what that did in our community in terms of Black men to soften their perception of gays. I don't know, but he was an important gay figure, gay character, that we were seeing every week on television. So that's all I have to say. I thank you both. I really think that you both are coming from a different point of view, but I don't see the reason to argue, really, because you both are saying some important things, and we need to hear from both of you. And I don't think there's an argument there. And thank you. Thank you both.
Yeah.
The context here, thank you so much, Lauren, because you make me realize that apparently I was clear, because you did reference my thoughts quite accurately. The reason we're talking about trans issues right now, and we're not talking about other issues right now, is because of who was behind the attack on David Chappelle and the cancelization, which was the white gay community. If this conversation was about violence against women, and that was the focus of this conversation, I could participate with no problem, because I've been, as I said earlier, been fighting against violence against women for years.
Same.
I mean, one of the biggest biggest fights I had with some men over the years is, for example, just to give you a little bit of history of me, as I said that Black women who are in jail for having killed their victimizers should all be let out. And women, regardless of race, should not go to jail for defending themselves from a domestic violator who's beating them every day and terrorizing them. It should be, and men say, how could you say that? I said, because they should not have to go through that. And that perspective, in terms of me articulated, came out of the work I've been doing for years in resistance to violence toward feminine people and women in particular. And I can have that conversation, been invited to women's conferences, all kinds of stuff. But the reason we're talking about now is because the most offended community, if you look at what white people have put on the center stage, between the Jews who were in space and the bitches in the holes and the white folks who grow old, young, and all the other people that he, quote, offended, is because white gays, and let me just say this, not to say this relatively briefly, because something that I know. The white gay community in the late 90s realized that they had successfully managed the HIV/AIDS issue. They went from being profoundly impacted to be the least impacted because of the success of what they did. They decided as a group, okay, we finished with that, we got that covered. Now we're gonna go into same-sex marriage. So they put same-sex marriage on their agenda and started addressing Congress and addressing other policy systems, including Barack Obama, to help them successfully make same-sex marriage United States policy. And they were like, okay, we've done that. Now we want to put transgender issues on the center stage. That's what we're doing now. That's our new frontier. So white gays decided to make trans issues a primary focus in the United States of America. And they've been so successful, people are announcing their pronouns, people are being called cis, etc., because of how powerful they are. The reason we're talking about David Chappelle is because they have yielded their power to look at him being canceled, as they did with the baby, as they did with Kobe Bryant, as they did with Tracy Morgan, as they did with whoever they want to do it with, because they got that kind of power. And that's why we have this conversation. And my point is, and I'm reiterating something I said a moment ago, I don't want a historically racist community like the LGBT community that has never cared about Black issues. That's why I mentioned Ed Buck earlier when he was murdering Black people. That community, I was talking about Black folks, Diamond. That community did not say a thing. It's not sane for us to let a larger white gay community agenda be what we actually bring into our community that creates more division between Black people. All kinds of Black people are dying. And Jonathan Kirk, who's called the baby, killed a Black man, as well as all of the divisive anti-Black stuff he had been saying on stage for a long time. And there were no powerful systems to try to cancel him until the white gay community decided that their agenda now could be put in center stage again, because this is what they want to do. I'll close all that to say that we have to be in charge of our own narrative and our own agenda, and that the diverse Black people are being killed. And we have to care about that. And we have to care about why Black men are acting out with hyper toxic levels of masculinity that ends in death sometimes, and see what's behind that, because you cannot resolve something that you don't deconstruct. And instead of deconstructing it, we just want to go, you're transphobic, you're homophobic, you're bad, y'all are killing us. Well, there's all kinds of Black people who can say y'all are killing us. And saying y'all are killing us, and that's it, but no context, won't solve nothing. And everything I articulate and do is with the goal toward resolution to women being violated against and Black people being violated against, generally, period.
I'm here because the Dave Chappelle special was specifically targeting LGBT people. And I'm here to say that Black LGBT people, particularly trans people, do not have the social power, the social capital to protect ourselves from the harm that his type of rhetoric will cause us. white people, yes, white gay people can have all the power, blah, 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 blah. But me as a Black trans woman, I don't have the social capital to shield myself from the consequences of what Dave Chappelle said. And most of the people in my community are in community. I have been on a train where a guy, I sat next to him and he used the same rhetoric of the alphabet people that he got from Dave to start an argument with me just and try to be violent with me just because I sat next to him on the train. Because I am in community. I don't have the big Benz in the car to ride around, to not be in the hood with the Black boys. I'm broke, so I'm in the hood with the Black boys. I'm in the community with the Black boys. So what Dave Chappelle does and says directly affects me. It doesn't mean that I don't care about the other Black people that are being murdered. I am here in the context of the Dave Chappelle special. Yes, people are being murdered, Black men are being murdered. I care about them, absolutely. When we're in the conversation about all Black people being murdered, yes, I'm not going to be talking about, well, what about trans people? I'm not going to be with that context. But because we are here based on the context of what Dave Chappelle said about trans people, I was invited here for that. Then I'm going to focus on what my community. Yes, if we're talking about intimate partner violence as a whole, yes, I'm going to include cisgender women, all women, yes. But the context of this conversation that I was invited to was about Dave Chappelle's stuff.
Let me ask you something, Diamond. Can you concede in any way that it's possible that the Black trans community is being, I'm trying to find a better word than pimped, taken advantage of by the larger community? Do you see that as a possibility at all?
No.
I definitely do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, let me see. Shakira, you've been waiting, so go ahead, please.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Helen, thank you a million times. Thank you for bringing this conversation to our attention and giving us an opportunity to really digest these issues, because I think what both Cleo and Diamond are saying are absolutely critical to healing for all of us. We have allowed kind of not just white folks, but the religious community to be oppressive against many people in our community who are LGBTQ, and I think that that this is so needed for our healing. I mean, we can't win if we are not all together. And so that said, I'm curious to know from you, Diamond, what you've talked about how, I don't know if it's you or the trans community in general, the Black female trans community in general believes that it is Black men who are the primary perpetrators of violence against you. But that said, if that is the case, what do you see as some solutions? Are there organizations, are there issues that we need to be following where we can be advocates for each other? And how do you want us to be responsive to this issue?
Well, for me, first of all, we have to center the voices of Black LGBT people. Because if you're centering white voices, then they are manipulating you, period. They are manipulating you and ignoring the people who are at the margins of that community, because you automatically are talking about them as if they have all the power, when we, the Black LGBT community, do not have the power. So organizations that are led by Black LGBT people, Black trans people, support them, see what they got going on. cultivate
So can you name
conversations.
them? I'm asking you to name them. So because I don't.
My organization, I'm the ED of Black Trans Women's Inc. Come on, we'll send me an email. I will show you exactly how you can support conversations that are not gaslighting. It's not even the idea of saying, if you think the culprit are Black men, that's not, I look at these cases every day. I get calls in the middle of the night of trans women who've been murdered. This is I'm in this work. I'm not somebody talking about it from the outside. I know who are the people who are killing us. And I'm not saying all Black men are killing us. That's silly. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the cases that I have counted since 2015. I literally have done this work. It is Black men who are the people who are going to jail for the murders of Black trans women. That's the people that I care about because they are the ones on the margins. The black, particularly dark-skinned Black trans women. When you think about the trans deaths, are there other Black deaths happening? Yes, absolutely. Do I care about them? Yes. But the rhetoric that Dave is saying is not affecting them. The rhetoric that Dave is saying is not causing Black men who getting murdered by cops. No, he's talking about us, Black LGBT people. And yes, he's making amazing critical analysis about the white races. Yes. But the negative stuff that you are saying is going to affect us more than them. That's all I want to get clear. If you take nothing else, is that there is a whole sector of Black LGBT people that are not shielded. I'll say once again, they are not shielded by the big machine of white gays.
That's true. That's very true.
So, and you just used a perfect example. You think I don't know how shady they were when it comes to the AIDS epidemic? How they were sharing pills with the rich boys who had money were sharing pills, AZT pills with their gay counterparts white gay counterparts who couldn't afford it. Why Black LGBT people was dying in the hospitals? Absolutely. But that is another example of how just because their movement is moving in another way doesn't mean that the Black version of them is protected. There is to me an accountability that needs to happen when it comes to Black men and the harm that they do to LGBT people, the harm that they do to women. And we have to look, while we understand what leads them to that distorted image of masculinity and wanting to be more of a man. We know the history of the birth of a nation. We know all of that, but it comes to a point. What we do, me and you in this conversation do. And so because we know that, there has to be a time when we gotta say, oh, okay, I need to hold myself accountable on the culture that is allowing our women of all kinds to be abused more. Like, what part do we actually play in it outside of the racist stuff? What part do we actually play in this? Now that's everybody, but I want to make it very clear. It's not that I'm thinking, oh, only care about the trans community. No, I was brought in this conversation because I'm a trans woman and we are talking about the trans shit of the Dave Chappelle. If this was a broader conversation, I would have talked about it in the broader sense, but I was brought here for this specific thing. And by saying all and broad, I feel like I'm being gaslit. Because in this particular thing, we are the ones who are going to be more harmed by the rhetoric that he is spilling out. That's all I want to say.
Shakira, one thing I think is be great to know, and maybe Helen will have a conversation on this one day, is that, for example, there are lots of trans people who support Dave Chappelle. There are lots of same-gender loving and LGBTQ identified people who support David Chappelle, who don't agree with him being canceled and who laugh at his comedy and who have a different perspective to some extent to Diamond.
No. Stop. I am a Dave Chappelle fan. I did not call for him to be canceled. I think none of that. I have watched every.
Okay, no. Okay, well, all right. Well, let me finish my point.
I didn't call for him to be canceled. I can look at the harm that he's done and say it and say okay. This is harmful.
Right, I understand you. You're clear as a bell. You're very clear. That's one of the things I like about you is that you're clear as a bell. However, there are people who are part of the same gender-loving community, and those who are identified as LGBT who have a different critical analysis than Diamond, who look at him differently. So I want to make sure you understand that though Diamond is passionate and brilliant and raises her perspective quite clearly, it's not only one perspective. One thing I liked about when I watched the 40 minutes of one of the 4 broadcasts by Diamond was she's one of the first people I know of from that community who articulated that there's a spectrum among trans. It's not just one thing. So, and thing is a figure of speech. I don't mean that in any kind of derogatory way. I said, this sister's like ain't tripping. She's not linear. She doesn't have tunnel vision. She has perspectives that I think are nuanced enough to provide some intelligence to the discussion. So I was intrigued by that by her. But so I want to make that clear. And one thing that's ironic to me about what Diamond said was that, and I'm paraphrasing, so correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure you will, that the white gay community has the machinery for protection of themselves, but Black people don't have that.
Depending on the class, yes.
And this is one of the reasons why, among other reasons, why they should not be running our brains in our community, and they should not be allowed to determine the architecture of our conversations, and they are. The other thing I want to say,
but what you're doing is what they do to Black feminists. Y'all try to say that it's the white feminism that is controlling our mind when we try to talk about Black feminism. When we try to talk about the oppression of women, y'all blame it on white women, like the white women are controlling us.
Diamond, this is why I preface my comment with, I hope he'll have a conversation about our diversity, because some of us, like me, I'm a same gender loving person. I'm a homosexual person all day long, been one for a long time. And I don't subscribe to the white paradigm of LGBTQ. It's a white paradigm that affirms white people, that uplifts whiteness, that symbolically, culturally, and epistemologically affirming of white folks and whiteness. Lesbians from Greece, the whole thing is white. So there's some people like myself who understand that and don't allow white paradigms to be how we reference ourselves in the world. And some of those people are trans. And if you look at on YouTube, there is a part of a interview with me and Roland Martin that's on there that has all kinds of trans people, same gender living people, even some LGBT, that whole alphabet thing that white people came up with. They're on that page talking in the affirmative about David Chappelle, because they're looking at it with nuance. They're looking at it from a Black lens, because something similar to what Diamond says, which I kind of agree with, is that when we walk through the door, we bring everything in the door. So we could even say, okay, look, you LGBT white folks, I ain't with it because y'all white and racist. So I'm not letting you determine how I think. I'm gonna think for myself, and I'm about Black people too. So I'm not letting you carry my philosophical water for me. So there's all kinds of things happening under this rubric. And if we have the conversation that I'm talking about Helen having regarding our diversity, and us having some revelations about our history and how we got here, it could be very helpful, because there's not just one narrative. And whatever the white narrative is, even when Black people are carrying their water, it's a narrative we keep hearing.
Can I just just throw in one thing here? I just would love it if the two of you would ensure that the rest of us have an opportunity to follow you on social media so that we can hear from folks in our own community. Because as you were saying, a lot of the narrative that most Black people consume comes out of the white media and the white agenda. So, I don't know many Black, the only trans women and men that I know are white. And I only know the story from their perspective. And I would love to be able to hear from Black folks' perspective what the real issues are and how we can support each other. Because well, you know, enough said. I've taken up enough air, but thank you.
And I think just Diamond, you know, touched on a point again. The reason why Diamond said that she came was because to address Dave Chappelle's stand-up special. And I wish we had an opportunity to talk about the specifics of that stand-up that offended, you know, offended Diamond and also the trans community. But one of the things after I listened to the special, you know, I texted a friend of mine, and, you know, not to equate, you know, Dave Chappelle, but what I did was I said, Dave Chappelle is the Malcolm X of comedy at this point. The reason why I said that is because he knew when he was going up on stage, he knew he was going to catch it. Because if you really watch that special, some of the things that he says, he pauses and he scans with his eyes the audience to get a responance. But at the end, what I respect about him was at the end. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Even before that, Dave Chappelle, two things I wanted to say to Diamond. I hope that you leave us with where we can follow the voice of the Black trans community, because I do believe that what we hear is not from Black people, and will that community set itself apart from the white trans community and say, hear us. But I think, you know, to your point, Demetrius, when Dave Chappelle opens up, what's the first thing he says? And I'm like, who cares that you're rich? He opens up by saying, I'm rich and I'm famous. And I think he did that for a reason, because he knew that what he was about to say was going to step on some people's toes. And that was, to me, his cold way of saying, and you can't cancel me. I'm going to say what I have to say. That's that. And so I think that he set the stage for what he knew was going to be and the things that he said. And I do wish that we had spent more time hearing from Diamond on the specifics, because when I broke down the specifics, which, you know, I went through and I literally sat down and listened to him like it was a class and took notes on what were the key things that he talked about. It was the baby. It was, you know, he talked about feminists. He talked about canceling J.K. Rowling. So he was just bringing out things, in my opinion, that made the larger community, not the Black trans community, but the larger community uncomfortable. And I put in the links for you all, an interview with Richard Pryor's bodyguard. And I'm like, what does he have to say about, Dave Chappelle? But I want you to listen to it, because he talks about Richard Pryor being blindsided by the gay community, being invited to an event that they told him was a human rights event. And when he got there, it was a gay rights event. And then when he was, you know, he didn't know what to do. And I just watched that interview, and it's very telling. But what the bodyguard is talking about is how there was an agenda that was bigger than the Black community that was coming after Richard Pryor. And now, you know, can you compare it to what's happening to Dave Chappelle? And it's not the Black community. It's not the Black trans community. It's not the Black community at large. And are we being used, the civil rights gains that the Black community have gained, are those gains being used to make an argument for people who themselves discriminate against us? And that's what I heard Dave Chappelle saying. So I don't know, but go ahead.
And the point that I wanted to make in regard to Malcolm, and again, I'm not equating Malcolm and Chappelle purely, but we know the history of Malcolm and Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King, and they both were used and pitted against each other by the white construct. What we have to understand is the last thing Dave Chappelle said was that this is the last time he's going to talk about the trans community in any stand-up until we can laugh together. Right? Just like Malcolm and Martin met together, that right there, that sent the signal to everybody that no, you're not going to divide this community. And the thing is, if we're talking about Black issues as Black people, the most important thing to do is someone or groups need to get with Dave Chappelle behind the scenes, talk about what you need to talk about, use his influence and his power, use your influence and your power, and then come out together and not allow this divide and conquer and address these issues.
But Demetrius, like I said before, though I don't support David being canceled, there are some things that he said that were dehumanizing to trans people.
Absolutely.
And that fed into tendencies to not want to take being trans seriously as a real way of being a human being. So even though there were some wonderful things that David said that looked warm and fuzzy and inclusive, he talked about Adam's apples. He talked about that's not blood, that's beet juice.
Something about a carpet. I didn't get that. Carpet instead of wood floors. That went over my head.
He talked about trans people in a way that creates question about their way of being, simply being part of the human family. And what was ironic about him having done that was he quoted Daphne, I think that was their name, who said, acknowledge that I'm having a human experience. See, one of the things that I've said about David when I was criticizing about him, while not wanting him to be canceled, is that he's a comedian. He's not a behavior scientist. He's not a sexologist. He's not someone who understands the history of human sexuality and gender nuance, particularly from an African or Black perspective. So, and he does have some underlining issues with Black male emasculinity or emasculation, which is why I mentioned in one of the interviews that I talked about how he was the one who said, I'm not putting on a dress back in the day. And even though they gave him a lot of money to put on the dress, he said no. And then tried to give him $50 million because they want to control him one way or the other. And he said no. So his critique of trans people being, quote, the implication of being too masculine or that this whole thing is kind of weird, happened while he was affirming Daphne. So I see that among other things in terms of why people who are trans, who want to be seen as nuanced human beings beyond the restraints of the Victorian era, and some of the stuff that you mentioned earlier in terms of what you saw in Africa when you learn, I'm paraphrasing you, that how human beings are when it comes to masculine and feminine is much bigger and more fluid than what you have been trained to think.
Let me say this. I feel like I think calling in Malcolm was important. Because I think I can use that as an analogy too. So what I'm asking Black men to do is what Malcolm did to Muhammad Elijah. When he found out that Elijah Muhammad was molesting girls, getting them pregnant, and then pushing them out of the Nation of Islam, he wasn't for that shit. Even though he was still against white supremacy, still against the white devil, still knew how racism worked, he also knew that this is wrong. What you've done to these teen girls is wrong. And if it makes me buck up against this family that I have found within the Nation of Islam, if it makes y'all turn against me, then even though I know that kind of stuff, I have to stand in my integrity. So for me, I want men to stand in their integrity and see the humanity of us based on the harm that the men, not all of y'all, but the ones that are doing harm to us, see our humanity and do what you need to do in your circles, in your home, to make sure that the men you are raising or the men you are in community with sees our humanity and knows that killing us is wrong. You can disagree. You cannot believe in the concept of transness, even though science backs us. But you cannot believe and you can disagree with that. But when it comes to us being human and you not wanting us to die or you doing whatever you need to do in your circles and your power, I want you to do that. I want you to do what you can to make them know that you're not here for not seeing our humanity.
And I believe they're principled people, just like Malcolm was principled. And one of the things that I feel as though personally was that was the one thing that caused his death, because that was the point in which not only people in the Nation of Islam, but also the FBI was able to take advantage of and really push Malcolm out. And what I'm saying is we got to look at that picture of Martin and Malcolm. If you want to resolve this issue, and this issue is still, new and fresh, then the person who offended the trans community needs to get behind the closed door, especially when he says at the end, I'm not saying anything else about the trans community, and stand up until we can laugh together. That means in laughing together, that means we have to address what I'm saying. We have to address the punching down of not only the broader community on the trans community, but also the punching down of trans to what he says is his community. So instead of punching at each other, we have to sit down and, just like that picture of Malcolm and Martin, and shake hands, because they both, well, it was mainly Malcolm that called out a lot of Christians and called some names to Dr. Martin Luther King that wasn't pleasant. But overall, coming together, that could be one of the steps to resolving this issue in regards to seeing masculinity in quote unquote a toxic way, and how to address properly the issues that we all have in each of our communities.
Let me just say that we have one more question that we're going to take, and then we're going to wrap this up. To your point, Demetrius, that sounds wonderful, but that would have to be something, in my opinion, that would be initiated in the Black community. I don't think the larger community has an interest in bringing us together, because I do think, there's this whole thing. I mean, I gave you a link in here from another comedian, Black gay comedian, who said that this is all about dividing Black against gay, Black community, at large against the Black gay community. And that's how he believes it. So if we're going to have a kumbaya, it's going to have to be implemented by us. And
we did that.
Helen, can I quickly say that, since they brought up, I can be quick, I promise. Since they brought up Malcolm, I have to mention that one of the things that Malcolm did, which was a huge mistake, which helped him to be set up to be killed, was that he went to white folks to tell on Elijah Muhammad. And he went to the white press, which was ironic, because they had been hell on Black people forever, nonstop and consistently, because he was so upset, and because of his personal struggle he was going through during his conflict with the nation. He went to, and I'm using the phrase that came out back then, the devil, to tell on Elijah Muhammad. And that's when that's part of why the nation backed off and said, okay, well, what happens to Malcolm is what happens to Malcolm. So we need to understand that we cannot use white paradigms, white sources, and white systems for Black people. We got to do it in a way that's relevant to Black culture and context. And most of this conversation has been rolling out from a white platform, even when Black people articulate it, and that's problematic.
Yeah, who is this group, National Black? I looked them up online, the National Black Justice Coalition. Are they Black owned? I saw a lot of Black faces, but where are they getting their money from? Do we know?
I know that organization like I know the back of my hand. That organization in the, I forgot, 90 something, when the white gay community were wrapping up their same-sex marriage policy agenda, they gave an Asian homosexual organization, a Latino homosexual organization, and a Black homosexual, bisexual, etc. organization money to use their ethnic connection to go into their communities to push same-sex marriage for the white gay community. The National Black Justice Coalition was founded and initially funded by the Human Rights Campaign to push gay marriage with a Black face in the Black community. As a matter of fact, because I was asked by Minister Farrakhan as an openly same-gender loving person to speak the Million Man March, the HRC, like they attacked David Chappelle with these Black people running behind him, they attacked me because they knew I was not going to carry their agenda onto the platform for Black folks. And they wanted one of their people to be who was chosen to speak the Million Man March. And they created a controversy to cancel me. So I know how that community likes to cancel Black voices and prefers that Black people who kowtow to them get the microphone.
Right. Wow. Okay. Lamisha, what's your question, dear?
I think it's more of a comment and a question. I joined late, so if this was already discussed, I apologize. I think that what you guys are saying about and how you're analogizing Malcolm and Martin is correct. And the term punching down, because I watched the special as well. I think what I took from Dave's special was that, yes, he has his own phobias, which he claims, but he is also saying that here is a law, here are a set of laws, anti-discrimination laws, specifically created for Black people. And it seems as though every other minority is benefiting from the laws except Black people. So I don't know why there seems to be an oppression Olympics when it comes time to use Title VII, and then instead of helping each other, we begin fighting each other as who is more oppressed, who is human and who is not human. When we should be drawing from the Black, if you're gonna use the laws that are created for Black people or for their protection, you should also be siding with them to make sure they are not left behind in your fight. And I think far too often that is what's happening, and I think that's what he was really trying to highlight. So I think it was more of a comment than a question.
Good point. So on that, this has been a lively discussion. I really, really hope that my hope for having both of you here, but particularly you, Diamond, is because we don't get an opportunity to hear from Black trans, and you are a part of our community. And I was hoping.
I gotta ask that question. How are you in community with white trans people and not Black trans people?
But back to Cleo's point, we're talking about Black people. So what we see, I
heard a couple of people say they only know the.
But I'm not in community. Okay, so let me just speak for myself, and maybe I'm generalizing. What we hear and who we see on TV, who we hear on the news, they're not our people. It's white transgender, it's the white gay community. It's not Blacks. So, and as Black people, I think that, there's a sense of people are showing up, as Lamisha just said, people show up and, take advantage of the struggles that we have made. But these same people are discriminating against us and you. I remember years ago, Cleo, you might remember Tongues Untied. Do you remember that special? So me wanting to understand what's it like to be Black and gay, I watched this special. I don't know. Do you know that one, Diamond? Tongues Untied? Was it PBS?
It was on PBS. Marlon Riggs was the writer and creator and director of that film.
So basically, the gist of it was that the person who they featured in the film, he was a gay person who lived in Washington, D.C., and he moved and he wasn't accepted in his own Black community. And correct me if I'm wrong, Cleo, because this was many years ago. This had to be back in the 80s. And he moves to San Francisco because he's feeling in San Francisco,
Castro.
I'm going to be accepted because these are gay people just like me. Yeah, but that wasn't his experience. So what I'm saying to you is people like me who are interested in understanding, I watched that film, and what I walked away with was that he was just as castigated in the all gay community as he had been in the Black community in Washington, D.C. So when do we as Black trans, Black gay, when does your voice rise above the larger gay community's voice so that we can hear you and then we can support you? So I was happy to be in conversation with you because, Kay is my student, and well, she's not now, she graduated, but Kay was very clear. Every time she had an opportunity in class or any other class, she would be sure to lift her voice as a trans woman. But she's probably the most intimate conversation that I've ever had with a trans woman. And I don't know what everybody else is
intentional about being in community with all types of Black people so that we don't have a blind spot that we have. We have to be very, very intentional about, because we know how white supremacy can dominate the conversation when it comes to, we saw it in the feminist movement. We know how, Phyllis Schlafly and Betty Friedan, and, we know how they can dominate a conversation. And so we have to be very, very intentional about finding Black voices, especially in, other demographics.
But what has to happen first is we have to create safe space and intentionally explicit safe space for same gender loving trans and bi people to step up and be openly a part of the Black family as opposed to being somebody who shows up without their partner and hiding and ducking, all that kind of stuff that occurs. Because if we don't actively, at this point, because so many people are wounded, intentionally say you're invited, some people are going to assume they're not invited, particularly given some of the language that Diamond and others have talked about in terms of some of the bashing and stuff that occurs. People are afraid and they don't want to be hurt again. So we have to not only intentionally broaden our spectrum, but we have to intentionally invite. But my final comments in terms of how this, in my opinion, being that this whole thing is happening because white gays brought it to the surface, is that, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, which is a reinstatement of the 1965 Voting Rights Act that prohibits racial discrimination against voting, did not get passed in Congress. White gays had no comment on that, including their LGBT followers. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, that's intended to stop racial bias and police misconduct, went to Congress and did not get passed. As we all know, reparations is still being called something that you shouldn't take serious as a possibility. And we don't have advocates outside of ourselves. We're trying to make sure that we have rights. So we need to make sure that who we support supports us, instead of inadvertently winding up on their platform when they do not care about us. And that's where I'm coming from. I want trans people and women and feminine people to not be abused because they don't want to play patriarchal games. But I want us to have that conversation from a Black, cultural, historically informed perspective, not a white LGBT pink rainbow flag triangle waving from Germany, lesbians from Greece, etc. point of view, but from a Black informed, including an African perspective regarding gender nuance and how normal cosmology. We don't know that. We don't know that history, but I know that history, and some of us do, and it would help bridge things if we had that history. Yeah. But they don't support us.
Helen,
I guess my last.
Helen, I have a comment. I just want to
very quickly, Linda. I'm trying to wrap it up.
I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, I grew up in a community where people were still migrating from the South. And we had people who we would call gay and all these different titles now, but that wasn't the case then. And they lived in a community, and it was a community. Nobody, they didn't stand out. They were like everybody else. So when I'm hearing this, especially when I've had the experience of living with people who were, fled the Ku Klux Klan during my high school time when they were coming up. And this was never an issue. And now to see the issue is really interesting when going back to what Cleo said about traditional Black culture. And I would say that in that public housing project, because these people were coming up straight from the South, they brought that Black traditional culture. And in it, nobody stood out. We were just human. And so this is really interesting to me. And I just wanted to make that point. We didn't have all
making that point. Diamond, and let me just say too, this call, actually, we had about 50 people on this call, which is a huge decrease from what our normal calls are. So that in itself is interesting to me, because why did we have, usually we have at least twice at least. So as a community, is this an issue to us? Did we watch Dave Chappelle and just laugh and really don't care? I'm not sure. So I just put that out there as something for us to think about. But anyway, Ms. Diamond, it has been an absolute pleasure. I'm going to give you the last word. And I do hope that you and I get to talk offline, because I'm very interested in what you have had to say here today. I'm very appreciative.
Thank you for having me. I have to care about women's issues because I'm a woman. I have to care about LGBT issues because I'm a part of that community. I have to care about Black issues because I'm a part of that community. And I have to care about dismantling colorism because I care about dark-skinned Black people as well. So I care about multiple issues because I have to, because they affect my life very, very directly. And so I am not getting some agenda from the white corporate gays. I am not getting my agenda. Sometimes things that I think, like thinking something is transphobic, is going to align with them because it is. And so, but I think for myself, I have tons of racial analysis and gender analysis. I make sure that I'm in community with Black people and in community with Black literature and Black experience of all kinds, so that I can have multifaceted view when an issue come up. And so I want to make it very clear that the white gay agenda is not my agenda at all. There are some things that we align. There are some things that I align with Black men. There are some things that I align with cisgender people, but they're not controlling my mind in that regards.
And on that note, I'm just going to say thank you all very, very much. Linda, did you want to give us a quick rundown on what your topic is for next week? Because Linda's taking the reign next week, folks. Linda. Okay, I don't know where she is. Anyway, we're going to end on that note. Cleo and Diamond, thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Oh, Linda's here.
Linda's here. I just want to tell you, next week, we're going to be looking at the impact of climate challenges on Black people and how we need to pay attention. And so we have a couple of parties that are confirming, I'm sorry to say, but I should know tonight. But basically, at the end of the day, if there's no Earth, none of us are here, and none of these issues will ever exist. Right? They won't matter. So, we're looking at climate first. That's the first thing. And it's not climate. I never say climate challenge. I say climate challenges. And it's climate challenges for human beings because unlike rats and roaches, we cannot adapt in 24 hours. It took us over 100,000 years to stand up. So, at the end of the day, all these issues are nothing unless we deal with the fact that there's some serious climate challenges and we need to be prepared for them. Thank you, Diamond. I gotta go.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Okay, Helen, can we keep this conversation going? I say let's keep this conversation going. You created this space for this talk. I say let's do it again. Let this not be the last time we get together and talk about this.
Absolutely.
Right, what Judy said.
I agree.
Oh, that's good feedback. I'm loving it. Right,
absolutely.
Right, Cleo? This is good.
Necessary conversation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Cleo and Diamond, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Diamond and Cleo. I really enjoyed you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to stop the recording and we can hang out for a minute. Cleo, you and Diamond, you're more